in the wrong place, feel free to wander out now. Yeah, grab some pizza and then head off. This evening is talking about the ups and downs of the entrepreneurial journey. So we've got Tom Howard from Adioso on stage just shortly. So he's going to be sharing some of the challenges that he faced, some low points. For those not familiar, Adioso went through Y Combinator in 2009, quite a prominent accelerator. He had some challenges towards the end of it, convincing Paul Graham to recommend him onto the next wave of investors. And I think some of his story is going to come in just the next stage right after that.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I've had a lot of depression in my life, not suicidal depression. I don't want to get too grim about it, but a lot of miserable, low depression. I actually don't anymore. I consider myself depression-free, if it's possible to be that. They talk about being cancer-free for 5 years, cancer-free. I consider myself depression-free, which is kind of great. And I hope that anyone in the audience who's suffering depression can take what I'm about to say as some kind of hope that it is actually possible to beat, and not just beat with antidepressants, but actually beat and never suffer again. One thing I haven't mastered yet is comfortable public speaking, hence relying heavily on notes here, so bear with me. I'm going to talk about the stuff I did that allowed me to get over the depression, and it gets weird. It gets weird into kind of woo-woo, new age, alternative medicine sort of shit, and that's kind of confronting to the sorts of people who, in the startup scene are into science and evidence-based things, which I used to be. Just stay with me. I hope it doesn't get too bizarre. Okay. The real low times for us at Adioso happened in about 2011 and 12. There was about an 18-month period there, and it was really the period after we'd initially got our initial sort of validation and success. We got accepted into Y Combinator in Silicon Valley and had our first round of funding and building a team. And at that point you think, to us, we thought we were rock stars. I did. Fen's a bit more modest than me, but I kind of thought I'd really made it. And what you don't realise is that getting your first round of success, getting into an incubator, getting into that that first step into that world is relatively easy. It's not easy, but compared to what comes next, it's actually kind of easy. It's the next step. It's when you're faced with the challenge of proving your technology and building an audience and building a team and getting some validation so that you can get your next round of funding. That's the real hard thing. Getting for us, our first funding was the seed round. Getting to your Series A, or that's where things get really interesting, and that's, I think, where most startups fall over. So we suddenly, and this is what I wrote about in this essay a couple of years ago, is that we had this sudden, this sudden horrid realization that maybe, just maybe, all the work we'd put into building this technology was about to go up in smoke. Okay, so what do we do? For a start, we heeded the advice of Paul Graham in this essay that I've always found extremely influential, which is called Just Don't Die. And the message there is that the worst thing you can do when your startup hits hard times is stop. The thing that kills a startup is not running out of money, it's when the founders stop working. So we decided we would keep going and we'd find a way to get through. We tried not to panic. We tried not to be affected by the panicked and emotionally charged advice we were getting from some investors and advisors. We just realised we had to step back for a bit and find some income just to keep ourselves fed and housed, and we got some contracting revenue. We claimed the R&D tax concession, which came in pretty handy. We got some small investments from family and friends who still believed in us. And then we started seeking new team members we did a world search thanks to the Y Combinator Hacker News website, and found people in different parts of the world who believed enough in what we were doing that they were willing to work for sweat equity. And then we just came up with a plan for what we had to do next to get fundable. And so The outcome, I mean, for a while there we thought things were looking up. What ended up happening was this grueling process through 2012, where we were building out our new tech platform. We were using whatever means we could to get small investments coming in. And believe it or not, one of the things that was most effective in raising money was writing these essays, kind of advertising to the world how badly we were doing and how miserable we were. And people actually came forward saying, that's awesome. People wanted to invest in our company. That was one of the most successful things. I really should be doing that again. But yeah, by August 2012, we're still on the precipice, and even though we'd actually completed the technology platform, we still hadn't yet been able to show investors or the world that the technology could translate into growth or commercial success. So it was a pretty grim time. We knew within ourselves that we had something amazing and valuable, but keeping the funds coming in to keep us going proved to continue to be difficult. So I have, like, my memory of the lowest moment was this wintry afternoon in July 2012. And I hadn't been sleeping very well. I was really wrung out. Our team members who had been working for Sweat Equity, they were out of sweat. They needed money. We had investors who were interested, but anyone who's raised money knows investors aren't really incentivized to move quickly, especially if you're struggling to raise. So they were being pretty slow to move, and we just didn't have any rabbits we could pull out of the hat to get more funds to keep things going. And on top of all that, on a personal level, Fen and I both had some family emergencies with close relatives in hospital, and just all of that. I mean, these are things that happen in life. You know, that's normal, but we're just in such a sorry state in our business and our personal lives that things really seemed grim. And I just remember us both sitting there, kind of staring into our coffees, staring at the wall, staring out the window, and around the same time, I'd sort of go out for dinner with my girlfriend, and I'd just be so kind of paralysed with thought of, like, just waiting for an email to come in bearing good news and running through all the permutations trying to figure out what we could do. And it's fair to say I wasn't much fun as a boyfriend at that time. But I had a reason to believe I could get through it, and there was something that had happened in that sort of preceding 6 months that gave me the strength to push through. I'd actually been putting a lot of effort into understanding and improving my health on both a mental and physical level. I'd tried a whole lot of things in previous years, like antidepressants and anti-anxiety pills and conventional psychologists and stuff, but that hadn't really got the outcome I wanted. It didn't really fix things. It just changed things in a way that I wasn't really happy with. And more recently, I've been trying a lot of holistic stuff, like paleo diets and detoxing and supplements and acupuncture and meditation and yoga and all of this stuff. Like everything that was out there, I was willing to try. The breakthrough happened. I actually went to a dentist. Yeah. A holistic dentist, of course, recommended by my acupuncturist. Believe me, it made sense at the time. This dentist diagnosed what's called a TMJ disorder. What had been happening was I'd been so stressed over so many years, I'd been clenching my jaw in my sleep, which had pushed my whole jaw, like my jaw joint, out of alignment. And so the dentist prescribed a treatment for that, but then recommended me to a chiropractor, because the chiropractor then found that after my jaw had been out of alignment, it was pushing my neck and my shoulder and my back and even my knees out of alignment. For a guy who a few years ago had been like this fanatical Dawkins, Hitchens, like atheist, anti-woo-woo bullshit fanatic, this was starting to get a bit weird. And then it got even more weird when I started mentioning some my emotional turmoil. And then he said, well, can I try this on you? And he tried this technique that I later found out was called neuro-emotional technique, or NET, which basically what it does is it finds stresses in your body, and using a very straightforward chiropractic technique releases them so you actually don't feel that fear or stress anymore, fully. And the thing about it was, like, after everything I'd tried over so many years, this was the first thing that worked. So it was after a couple of sessions of these Cairo sessions that, hang on. So, sorry, what I learned through that period was that, in fact, the stresses and fears that hold us back in life are actually stored deep within our body and within our subconscious, and that the negative emotions that complicate our ability to function, and they can be very difficult to overcome unless you have a technique that allows you to remove them once and for all, which is what I discovered. So this NET technique I discovered, it might sound bizarre and it's like new age bullshit, but it's actually very similar to a whole lot of other treatments that are a lot more sort of accepted and mainstream, like meditation, yoga, NLP is one that anyone who's read the Game, that pickup book, would be familiar with. But even conventional cognitive behavioural therapy. It's all doing the same stuff, it's just that this is the one that worked for me. So with that tool, we're able to push through. We're able to keep going. I just knew that somehow if I just kept going, kept staying positive, things would come together. And sure enough, we kept telling our story to our investor network, we kept writing blog posts, we kept working on our product, and bit by bit, bigger and bigger investments started to come in. We were able to pay our team, and slowly but surely things snowballed, and things came together. The culmination of that, I guess the next big breakthrough was last year. We were able to recruit a CEO who had a really strong background in the travel industry. And he was able to open doors into airlines and airports and finally give us the commercial model we'd always needed. So to cut to today, we've got steadily growing traffic, revenue, and we're going to have a record month for both revenue and signed up users. We've got commercial deals to license our tech to airlines and airports, and we're preparing to launch a new consumer product that I can't say much about, but I'm pretty excited about it. And on a personal level, I don't get depression anymore. I rarely even get low moods. I'm certainly, I think, a much better boyfriend and friend, and I hope co-founder to Fen. We still have a lot of big challenges in our business, but I don't feel it personally, and I don't let it weigh me down on a personal level the way I used to. So, to me, the biggest lesson is that in the startup world, we have this idea that success will bring happiness, and I know that unhappiness and a desire for a better life is what brings us into the startup scene, and that there's this idea that once we succeed, once we make it big, then we'll have the money, the fame, the freedom, and then we'll be happy and life will be good. And all the evidence I see is that the reality is very much the reverse. It's only by having your shit together emotionally that you can achieve success. And the successful people are the people who can confront any challenge that comes their way and remain stoic and centered no matter what happens. And finally, and this is something that I guess I've had to learn the hard way, there's no need to be a hero. In the startup world, we often buy into this idea of the man in the arena, this metaphor of this heroic guy who's succeeding and triumphing over all the odds and all the critics and everyone who's sitting around doing nothing, and that it's somehow noble to keep pursuing this dream against all the odds, no matter what hardships you endure. And I used to think that, and I don't anymore. Life's just too short to waste having a miserable time doing something futile. I only persisted because I was confident that I'd be able to get through it and come out better because of it, and that so would my investors and team members and everyone around me. So far it's turned out to be correct, but it's very easy to misjudge if you don't know what you're doing. So I guess above all, be careful and look after yourselves. Thanks very much.
Excellent. That was a pretty amazing story. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. There were a couple of comments there that personally hit home a lot for me. Jumping straight into the next section, because I'm conscious of time, we're going to have the Q&A panel. So if I can invite our speakers to the stage, I'll give you all a quick intro and then invite you up one by one. So we have Obradovic. So Andre is previously from the army. Over this side, there he is. So former SAS soldier. I think was 19 years in the military. Yep, 19 years in the military before moving on to Cisco and Samsung in executive positions. You're also CEO of a small tech startup, and you're involved in coaching with Witchpath. Yeah, so specifically of interest was about last year. Andre was sort of hit out of the blue by mental issues and just hit like a bus. Yeah. And so some of the ways that you were able to work through that and cope are going to be of interest to talk about. Next up we have Assyl. Where's Assyl? Oh. Asyl's hiding in the back of the room. Right, so Assyl was previously the founder of liveinaustralia.com, which was started back in 2001. 2001. So that was a startup that ran for quite a long time, I think until 2007. 2010, even longer than my research came up with, until policy changes basically ripped the rug out from underneath him. So it was words are escaping me here.
Not fun.
It was not fun. Yeah, that was what I meant to say. No, it was a business that helped people find visaship and moving to Australia. And then due to a change of regulation, basically the entire business. So the market shifted through no fault of your own, and the business that you'd spent ages building up was basically shifted on. So now you're working with another group. You're working with the Growth Solutions Group?
Pitcher Partners.
Pitcher Partners. Right, okay, sorry about that. So working in digital strategy with the Pitcher Partners now. So hopefully there's some interesting stories there about going through a failed startup and that sort of stuff. Yeah. Next up, Eve. There we are, Eve Blackall. So Eve Blackall currently runs smartaccounting.com.au, and she has basically worked with hundreds of different companies, helping them get their finances in order, from startups through to ASX 100 listed companies. Also has been on Channel 10's The Project. Yeah. Also has an interesting story about a previous startup that went through bankruptcy and almost got you barred from practice, if that's correct. Yeah, so ups and downs. And then finally we've got Blake Hutchinson as well. Blake. There we are. So yeah, Blake has previously been involved with Lonely Planet and Nile Guide. Also, Agenda, I think, was a flash sales marketing.
Startup.
A failed startup. There we go. Experience. And you went for without pay for over a year as well.
And going again.
And still going, jeez. So yeah, there's some interesting stories here. So we'll should be able to have a quick Q&A. The goal for this is really to get the audience to chime in as much as possible. I've got some questions prepared, but really you guys are the smart ones in the room. So as soon as you have a question, just throw up the hand. I'll get us started, but really I do want to get as much audience involvement on this. So let's shuffle the chairs around. Have you all got drinks, glass of water? Is this going to reach without causing destruction? That's a question. Oh. All right. So we've been talking a little bit doom and gloom so far in terms of everything. So to pick things up, the purpose of this event is the ups and downs. So how are things going with you all now?
Yeah, I think they're going okay. I'm pretty happy right now, actually. I'm not sure why, but I am. So, decided not to take pay again about 4 months ago. So that was a big decision, but a little like Tom said, it was a matter of business goes broke or stop pulling money out of it. But I think we're doing the right things. I think we're generating the right results among our merchants. We're a two-sided marketplace and customers, so things are going okay, but it's been up and down.
I have to say I couldn't be happier. Having been through what I've been through has enabled me to help businesses in a completely different way to what I was doing before, and that's that experience of having lost everything really does open your eyes and make you a lot more empathetic to somebody that's sitting there going, oh my God, what do I do? I'm paralysed. And being able to advise on that and help people through now. And that's what I do. It's that experience has enabled me to be really, really helpful as opposed to just, okay, yeah, here I am, I'm doing my job. So I couldn't be happier.
I'd say, yeah, also to describe it as being in a pretty good space. life's good. Very thankful for lots of things, and gratitude is a really powerful thing to maintain as a. Sometimes it's easy, and sometimes you got to do it by choice. But it's always good to do, whether things are up or down. I think for me, in my case, as part of exiting the business, because we had to appoint an administrator, well, not had to, it made sense in the end to appoint an administrator and then sell the business. Whole story and a whole bunch of lessons around that experience. But in case anyone's wondering, if you have to do it quickly. But try and not have to do it more than once. That's the approach I'm trying to adopt. But yeah, after having exited the business, I'm now starting to really feel how much I miss being involved in a startup. So starting to this late last year was a decision to sort of re-engage in the space again and just see where that goes. So quite excited about that. Yeah.
Well, when any of my colleagues from where I used to work ring me and they say, "How are you, Andre?" I say, "I'm fucking fantastic." I mean, I think after what... Yeah, thanks. Because you know what? Because I've only got about 10 million minutes left to live. That's serious, right? Because I'm nearly 50. My health-adjusted life expectancy is 70.9 years, which is about 10 million minutes. So, I don't, my whole give a fuck factor about things has disappeared since I got sick, because 12 months ago I thought about killing myself. And that's a pretty dark place to be. But I'm fantastic now. I've got a great wife. I'm working with amazing people who I love, and I hug them, and they love it. And I'm coaching people about how to change their preference to the way they think and act and behave around a whole lot of things. And I'm running New York Marathon this year, so I'm in a really great place. And I speak for Beyond Blue. So I go and help remove the stigma that people have about anxiety and depression by getting up and telling my story. Not that I'm doing that tonight.
That was destined for failure. I've lost the job. So that actually segues into a point I was going to make next. So you work with Beyond Blue, and I'll start it back the other way, because otherwise you're going to be waiting for a long time. So what are some of the coping mechanisms? When things get tough, what can we do to grit through it and come out the other side?
Well, I think my lesson is don't just have your work and don't just focus on money or the Porsche or your company. Because one day when that disappears or you get sick because you've been working 18 hours a day like a dog, not spending any time with your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever, and your job and your career and whatever you want to do goes away, you're screwed. That's what happened to me. I was lost. So focus on what your core values are apart from work, because it is just a job. So for me, it's around having tools that help me stay well. I don't drink alcohol at all. I am anal about exercise and fitness, so that helps me every morning, starts my day and gets me in a good mood, and if I don't do it, I have a shit day. Sleep. So when I was in Cisco, I was working till 1 or 2 a.m. nearly every night for 14 years because I ran a global team and I made a shitload of money. Why? Because I wanted the money, right? So I worked hard and made more money. Then I went to Samsung and I was working 20 hours a day, so I only lasted there 14 months. So sleep. Now I'm in bed at 10 o'clock, at least 10 every night, and I sleep till 6 or 5:30, and I sleep and I dream. And sleep is so important. So no grog, exercise, sleep, and having other things to think about apart from work are the things that keep me balanced and stop me from going back to that dark space again. I think they're the things I focus on. And nutrition. So having a good nutrition plan and not eating junk food.
Coping mechanisms?
So something that helped actually in advance of the business starting to come into challenging waters is we had developed some company values to help define or articulate the culture. And at the core of it was, they were called the 3 L's. So love your work, love your life, and love your world. And at the core of it, we defined success as winning, but not at all costs. And that meant, similar to what you were saying, Andrea, about protecting the priorities within work and outside of work that mattered. And that included things like relationships, in the workplace and at home. So for me, we were in a position, when you're in a position where you're just not expecting to be, especially after, I guess, 9 years, it was really helpful to have some consistent things that were outside of work. So, in my case, it included the relationship with my wife, relationships with mentors, relationships with a team. And for me, it was, how do those things go if this business isn't here? How does that affect my identity or how I see myself? And sort of being able to see on the other side of it made a huge difference to coping through it. But definitely sort of, the other thing was not, I guess it's linked to relationships, but on one hand, when I was trying to work through the business issues, I became extremely focused. In fact, the only time I can remember probably being more focused was when I went into this fun run. There were 35,000 people, and I went in on the wrong side. So I heard the starter's bell, and I saw 35,000 people running towards me. I'm pushing my 6-month-old son in a stroller, and boy, was I focused at turning it around and running the other way. Record time. Anyway, so I became really focused trying to deal with the business issues and probably pushed a lot of people out, didn't allow much time for interacting. That was not good. Because getting to hear from other people and interacting with them and actually recognizing, well, when you're in an entrepreneurial space, you're often doing stuff that hasn't been done before. So it's a messy process. And having people around you that'll still say, hey, you've still got value and an identity in other respects. That's a massive thing. So yeah, highly recommended.
Thanks. I need to give a bit of background about how I got where I got so that it makes a bit more sense. I started my accounting practice, a tax practice, straight out of uni. I ran it for 15 years. It was hugely successful. Then I met a Melbourne boy and thought, I'll sell this and move to Melbourne. Still thinking I was hugely successful. Sold my business, got to Melbourne, and was then told I was not going to be paid. So for any of you thinking about selling your business and having tons of money, I had that dream, and then all of a sudden it was gone. The problem with not being paid is, as a startup, I had lots of loans and investors that I needed to repay who suddenly weren't going to get their money. That, by definition, made me bankrupt. As an accountant being a bankrupt, I had not only lost my business and my startup and my vision and my money, I'd lost my career. So what I had to do was get myself off the floor from crying, which I did for the first week, quite literally, and thanks for my husband for putting up with that, off the floor and go, okay, this wasn't my fault. I didn't create this bankruptcy, and therefore I may be able to get my practicing certificate back. So I had to apply to CPA and specifically explain and sit in front of 3 very scary accounting-looking guys, and even being an accountant I was scared, and get my practice certificate back so that I could continue with my career. What got me through that was the eventual realisation that I wasn't my business. Having started my business straight out of uni, from 18 until I was 35, that was all I'd done. Literally, I didn't really have any friends. I don't know how I ended up with my husband, but somehow that magically happened in between. I'd moved to Melbourne. I had no support network. So I had to look at myself and go, oh, what do I want to be? Do I want to continue lying on the floor crying? That is my only choice right now. I can continue lying on the floor crying. Continue lying on the floor crying. And that's not a good thing. You can't spend forever lying on the floor crying. And then having to disassociate myself from my business and say, okay, well, let's think about 5 things I like about myself. Now, I was actually set the task by a friend to think up 40 things I liked about myself. I could only come up with 5 at that point, which was pretty pathetic. But I do recommend to everybody in the room, apart from your business, that you make that list and you keep that list and you look at it every so often to just remember who you are. You might be an entrepreneur, you might be having a fabulous business, but you're also a friend and a parent, and you might be good at looking after your goldfish. I had to put that down, it's pretty sad really, but there you go. Having that list was one of the things that really got me through, and then having people that believed in me that I could go to and say, am I really good at looking after the goldfish? Yes, yes, you are. Okay, all right, that's true. So those two things, the list and the network, meant that I could actually take the baby steps to keep going.
Bit of a theme, I think community, so figure out the people who are the most important to you, figure out the people who will support you, and figure out the people who really don't give a shit whether you're successful or not. And so my mates told me that. My mates are amazing, and my wife is the best. And neither of them give a shit whether I'm successful because they like me already. So that's a good thing. And when you're having those down patches, for anyone who's having it, it's best to turn to those people who you know will support you while you're down, but will also be the quickest at bringing you back up. And then find those things that you did before you were running your startup. So whether that is running, whether it's going to the footy, whether it's going to the pub, I don't know what it is for you. For me, it was those three things. Find those things and take them back, and set a meeting request for yourself and leave work at a time you've probably never left before. That's a really good thing to do when you're down. And, you know, just in summary, I think that community is absolutely key. There's this amazing startup in San Francisco right now called Happier. And her whole mandate is getting people to share, not on Facebook, not on Instagram, not anywhere else, to share happy moments on Happier. And she's found that this startup, Happier, is having a profound effect not only on the broader community that gets to see happy moments from everyone else, but most importantly on startup founders who get to see the happy moments of their friends and family while they're at work. So community is key.
Excellent. Yeah, the concept of identity and separation of concerns is something that really resounded between all four of you. I think it's really hard when you're leaving work at, you know, ungodly hours to really separate this from yourself. I'll throw it out to the audience shortly, so if anyone has any questions, please just throw up your hand and I'll try and give you a nod so we can get round to you. I'll give it one last lap before we jump into that. This is something that I've personally felt. There's a pressure to always be up, always be pitching, always be closing. You always have to have a curve that's, you know, J-curve high and to the right. You can't ever really share your success story, or your troubling stories. There's an expectation of always sharing the success stories. Whereas Tom suggests that might be otherwise. Do you have a personal feeling around the expectation that you always have to be up? Does that cause a facade within yourself if you do that? Or is that something that you haven't had troubles with?
Look, I think you're more productive when you're up. I think we all agree with that, right? So, yeah, there's a pressure to be up. It helps the team around you. One of my staff said to me one day, I think it was about midday, and she just said, I don't think I can be around you anymore. It's really hard to get my job done. So, why? That's odd for her to say that, because I'm a naturally very positive person, so that actually hit really hard. So yeah, there's definite pressures there, and I think that you need to be careful not to pass on negativity. Negativity breeds negativity. I don't think it's helpful for your colleagues, your friends, your family. And negativity is not just in startups, right? It's in all sorts of workplaces, sporting teams, wherever else. And so, yeah, I mean, to be frank, I think there probably is a pressure to be up, and you just need to find the best way to deal with that.
Particularly as a consultant, there is quite a lot of, I need to be there for my clients. But it's also okay for me, and it's something that we agree in the beginning as part of how I engage with clients, to have a quiet day. And I'll just say, yep, I'm a bit quieter today, I'm just going a bit more slowly. And it doesn't mean that I share the fact that I'm not as up as normal. I don't have to be as energetic, and I can just take a bit more time and space for myself to be a bit calmer. I think nobody's energy is up all the time. It's just not natural. Even if it was because we stayed up and watched whatever it was, soccer until 4 in the morning. There could be 100 reasons. But I think it's actually important to acknowledge and be honest about the fact that, okay, I'm going to need a bit more space, or I'm going a bit quieter today, or I'm going a bit slower. Because if we set the expectations on ourselves to always be up, then it's really hard to meet that, and that just creates more pressure. So it's about quarantining the not up. It doesn't have to be a down day, it's just about quarantining that and saying, okay, I'm going a bit slower, I'm being a bit quiet, I'm having a quiet day, or I'm a bit flat, or being honest about it as well.
Yeah, definitely agree with that point. I mean, by nature, and I guess with a lot of people that go into business, I describe myself as more of a glass half full person. Forget the saying about the cloud and the silver lining. I go, all I see is a silver lining. I think that's great. Look at that. So, problem is though, you got this balance between, sometimes stuff doesn't work, and that's just normal. That's part of the journey. There's a difference between maintaining an even keel when you're in a leadership role, and in my case, that meant that there was a team of 23 that knew there was stuff going on, but they're still looking to you for answers. So there's a difference between maintaining an even keel and still fulfilling your role as leader and making decisions and providing direction, while still being truthful about what's going on. So how do you balance that? And I think for me it was about the way I heard it put once was part of a leader's role is to identify when to celebrate, when to start a fire because one needs to be lit, but also to be truthful when an emergency needs to be declared and say we've got to do something about this. And it can actually be really galvanizing when you actually are truthful about it and you go, hey, here's a problem, we've got to come together and do something about this, but still show bring it back to why we're doing this, your purpose, why what's the problem that you're solving as a business, why does it matter for you to try and pull through and come out the other end. And that I found that really liberating, because then you're not trying to just put on a false sense of, oh no, everything's fine, when it might not be. So being truthful but still even-keeled.
Well, it's an interesting question. I was just reflecting on what everyone said, and I guess I've always led big teams, so I'll take it from that perspective of having to have 70 or 100 people working for you. And I guess what I went through in terms of that is that, you'd come into work every day with a suit and tie on, and people were expecting you as a leader to always be positive and driven and set the scene for how things should happen around the culture of, motivation, enthusiasm and just getting shit done. And, doing that every day when underneath most days you were completely exhausted and didn't want to be doing what you were doing is so draining. So I think as a leader you have to sort of set the scene and set the example for people, but there's also another part about empathy and vulnerability, right? So you don't want your people to do the same as you. As a leader, generally a leader should always work harder and put more in than your people. So you don't want your people, if you're finding it hard to cope, to be in that same situation. So on reflection, I think, now that I'm in a different space and I'm CEO of a small 8-people company, our culture is all around being okay to show vulnerability and not knowing everything and not always being up, but recognising that and then pulling together as a team. We're about to start meditation in the office as well for a short time on a regular basis as well. But I think it's a good thing that you think about these things and understand that it's okay not to always be up, but you got to think about how your people react to that if you've got a team. As an individual, it's probably a bit harder, I guess, but there's a different context there.
safer to pass it back. Yeah. Were there any questions from the audience off the back? Yep, okay. Yep, just in front with the glass.
What do you think the correlation is between the amount of money in the business and the founder's happiness?
So the question was, what do you think the correlation between the money in the business and the founder's happiness?
Zero?
I work with a lot of businesses and pretty well zero. Like, I've never, ever, ever been able to create any kind of metric that measured it sensibly. It totally depends on the owner as what they think is enough. And a lot of people, particularly in this society, enough is never enough. There's no end result. So, and even if you're an entrepreneur, I'm not criticising that decision, but as an entrepreneur with a strong drive, enough is never enough. So I don't think, even for myself, I'm happy doing when I'm doing. It's not actually related to the money.
Have a go,
I was earning a shitload of money. I'm earning a fifth of that now, and I'm so much happier, right? I work 3 days a week. I do coaching. I'm not earning hardly anything. I'm so happy. There's no stress. We adjusted the way we live as a family, adjusted our budget. It's all good. I think when you really think about what are you doing, what are your values, what's important to you, or are you a prick and all you're interested in is your beach house and your money? What are you going to do when you're nearly on your deathbed and think about, right? What's important to you as a person, and how do you live with yourself if all you're interested in is money? Because it'll never be enough. Because I was on 350, then I went to 500, and we still spent it all, or like it wasn't enough. I'm not earning enough, right? And it never stops. But you can if you have to. I had to quit work because I can't go back to that type of job again. So you live, and you live fine, and you're happy, It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd just add to that working in an area where you feel you've got purpose and having healthy relationships, in my experience, is a higher predictor of happiness. On the money side, there is probably some meaningful line from what I've read that you have to sort of be making enough to kind of not have to worry about it, not for it not to be a distraction. But there are definitely bigger problems to have, and it's not the threshold for money being a predictor stops a lot lower than some of those other things.
So one of the challenges might be that you might have to desire money, and that might be that if you're a funded startup. So if you've got an investor who actually is expecting a return, then you're probably going to have to desire money. It doesn't mean it's going to make you happier personally, but you're going to have to desire it for somebody else's return. So I don't know, it's a different statement to that, but money comes in very different forms. I also think that living without any money is sometimes creating a little more duress than you would probably want. So there's, as you all said, there's a balance, right? You can earn too much and not think it's enough, and you can earn nothing and definitely desire a little bit more, and that's probably very healthy. I suppose that's all I'd add.
Yeah, definitely. There's probably something to be said about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and once that's covered, then it's about self-fulfillment and that sort of stuff. So we had another one just behind, and then
kind of touched on what my question was going to be. How important do you think it is for those who are thinking about starting up, before we start up, to have written down goals, written down reasons as to why we are doing what we are doing in business, and written down values, personal values, before we start? Or for those who are in business, how important are written down things in that area?
So the general question was how important are values, goals and purpose in this, written down specifically?
Pretty huge. I'd say especially the values and, sorry, you mentioned values, goals
reasons for
and reasons, right. Though, Yeah, so by writing it down, like anything, it does make it more real, and it does sort of bring you back to it, because those are things that are very easy to get. When you're running a business and things are either happening or not happening, you're pretty busy. So by having it written down and revisiting it, it stays on your mind more. And those are the things you come back to when nothing else makes sense. So, and sometimes starting a business or running a business doesn't always make sense. Things will blindside you or stress you out. You kind of go, what on earth am I doing this for? And coming back to what you mentioned earlier and being able to look at it and read it and sort of go, hey, this is, at the end of the day, life, this is part of my life. What am I doing this for again? And it's really helpful, really important, I'd say.
I would absolutely agree. I can't say how many businesses I walk into and say, have you got this stuff written down? They go, no. I go, well, how do you know what you're doing? Or worse, they've got it written down and they stick it in their bottom drawer. It's like, well, when was the last time you looked at it? Oh, 5 years ago. Well, no wonder. So writing it down is important. Looking at it often is almost more important. Just keep to the faith. And updating it's okay as well. You don't have to have it always saying the same thing. You can update it. Oh, I don't want to do that anymore. Good-o. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're committing to. So it's about that realness of the commitment.
The updating is really key. So yeah, get them down on paper, but update them really frequently, I think, because certainly pre-launch, your forecast for whatever you have, whether it be customer engagement, whether it be merchant acquisition, whether it be whatever, app downloads, you're wrong. You're definitely wrong. So I haven't seen your plans, and if you haven't launched yet, your forecasts are wrong. And so on that basis, it's really critical that you get incredibly honest with yourself and make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. And often the right reasons are passion for what you're building or creating.
So yeah, front and centre.
I've got a question for Eve. I saw you on the project. By the way, I thought you were awesome. You talked about things such as cash flowology, profitology, and exitology, all those strategies. What do you see as being absolutely necessary for those of us who are startups and small business owners to have in place from a financial perspective from the get-go?
Just repeating the question, what are the absolute critical things to have in place with the start?
Financial perspective for startups and small business owners.
From a financial perspective for startups, just so that people at the back of the room can hear.
Don't underestimate the power of your accountant. And everybody here in this room, your accountant is probably the most boring person you know. I recognise that. But if you can get them to give you information, if you can learn how to ask them questions, if you can be brave, they will help you. Now, okay, sometimes that costs you. Sometimes you can get away with questions that won't cost you. Genuinely, if you get a good accountant, and I'm just talking about a general tax accountant even, your bookkeeper, don't underestimate these people. Because when things are starting to go a bit pear-shaped, when costs are not quite right, they can often be the people that will see the trends first. Learn how to read your profit and loss. Again, there's ways of doing that doesn't involve you having to understand debits and credits. You don't have to be an accountant to know how to look at the financials in your business. Also, start your business thinking about how you're going to end it. Now, that's a thing that lots and lots of people miss. In the excitement of it all, there's either the I'm going to sell for lots and lots of money. Doesn't always work like that. It's okay to have a business that you're just going to close. But decide what your business model is going to be and ensure that your exit strategy is clear and sound. Thinking I'm going to pass this on to my children and then not having children, or having 3 boys when you've got a dress business, or whatever the issues may come up, doesn't mean you can rely on an exit strategy that's not well published, well thought through and well delivered. So those 2 things are probably 3 things really. Managing your cash flow is an after effect of being able to run your profit and loss well. So that comes in together. But relying on your accountant, understanding your accounts well and being able to ask good questions, first and foremost. And second, know where you're going, know how you're going to get out.
Did you want to add that? Yeah, please by all means do ask questions for any specific panellist. And if you do have a question, raise your hand and then keep it up until I give you the nod. That way I can make sure that you'll get around. I think I saw you next. So, yeah.
I was just going to say, with the wisdom of hindsight of everything that you guys have been through, what was one takeaway or one thing that you would change for you?
So the question was, with the wisdom of hindsight, what's one thing you'd change?
Yeah, it's a takeaway that you would sort of do differently.
Yeah, what would you do differently?
I would have taken my passion of photography at school and done that. I would have taken my passion for photography and made that my career.
But without, sorry, can I just, without that sort of, in relation to what you've been through and your experiences?
Oh, okay, sorry. I wouldn't have chased the extra money and I would have stayed where I was.
Now, assume you're meaning in the context of the specific business, yeah? What? Okay. Well, there's lots of things. Yes, that's really interesting because hindsight can be really deceptive, and it's really easy to intertwine the stuff that you think you would do differently, but really you could not have foreseen. And there's some of the stuff. Some of the stuff that I beat myself up over initially, I realised there's no way I could have had the foresight to predict what the government would have done. So in my case, I would say if your business is highly dependent on government policy, then just watch that if it's highly dependent, right? Because they're all probably impacted to some degree. But just watch that. Don't allow that to continue on for an extended period without diversifying your revenue. So that would be, and then the other small bit is, with hindsight, I had the opportunity to sell the business, and I think I was too dismissive of that. And in hindsight, I think part of that was a bit of ego, and part of it was, there was more that I felt we could achieve, but I think I probably would have taken that. I should have at least given that the consideration it deserved, rather than being too quick to go. Forget that, no way.
My glib answer, and I've been asked this many times, is never date a Melbourne boy. Other than that, and you mentioned this a little earlier, if you're in a really bad situation, liquidate fast and liquidate cleanly. My liquidators actually lost my file. Vanished, was shredded, God only knows what happened to it. And that was one of the big reasons why I was actually never paid out of it, because a legal case couldn't proceed because the liquidators lost the file. I don't know how that happened. How could I possibly change that? But I could have chosen better liquidators. I chose a friend and should have shopped around. So there are things that can mitigate disasters, and that would have been one of them for me.
Yeah, in my case, it's probably picking the right investor. I think that as startups, it's quite interesting because investors do a lot of due diligence on you. So entrepreneurs often stand up and they pitch a group of investors, right? And that investor then says they like you, and they grab a whole heap of documentation, talk to your team, all of those things, and they give you the up or down. Once they give you the up, they'll then go through your books and do the due diligence, and then finally they'll make an assessment of you. What startup entrepreneurs very rarely do is do their due diligence on investors, because they're so excited. They're so excited about getting the funding. They're so excited about the next growth period and hopefully trajectory. And that for me was probably, in hindsight, a big mistake that I made. And just to tell you what that mistake was, other investors wouldn't play ball because that investor doesn't have a particularly strong reputation. So that came out and therefore impacted our ability to get additional rounds of funding. And so, in my case, that would be the decision.
Yeah, Yeah, excellent advice. I think we had one up the back and then over this side. Yep.
So everyone plans sets goals and plans to be successful in things. How important is it to set goal or find out kind of plan B? At what stage in your business should you be planning these things? Kind of not failures, but times when you're not going to succeed in your goal. Like how important is that?
Yeah, everyone plans for success, but no one has a plan B or a plan Z. Should you plan for failure?
Yeah, should you kind of plan to not succeed? And if so, when should you do that in your business?
Okay, and if so, when?
Yeah, look, I personally think you should plan to succeed. Take that approach, absolutely. But one of the big positive elements of a great startup founder, I think, is resilience, right? So the ability to be able to change when you have to. And that might mean closing and moving on, and that's fine. And that doesn't mean it wasn't a success. But it also might mean sitting back, taking a week, taking two, and maybe coming up within the context of whatever you've got going for you, whatever your current assets are, coming up with a new concept which you think might be far more viable than the old one. And again, then planning for success. I think you should always plan for success. Otherwise, you probably haven't started out with the right mindset, would be my view.
Did you have something quick to add? Or? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Having a plan A is really important to keep you going where you're going. But I change the font of my plan A all the time. My first plan A was Courier font, and now my plan is Calibri font. You know, it doesn't mean that you can't have one focus and update that.
Thank you. Just in the context of time, one last question.
Guys, the quality and type of guidance and mentorship that you're getting, how did that affect your happiness, your capacity to bounce back from failure, and your resilience?
How did the quality and type of mentorship affect your ability to bounce back? And
Should I be louder?
No, that's all right. Just there's people up the back. Yeah, so how did the quality and type of mentorship affect your ability to perform?
Do you want to start on that?
Yeah, okay. I had a great mentor that helped me talk about, because I'd lost a lot of confidence at that time, and he would ring me, he would talk to me about all the positives to think about, nothing negative, wouldn't let me go back to the bad times and focus on the future. So he was very future focused and drew me back to things that I've always done in the past that were successful, and he didn't let me ever start thinking or talking about the things that went wrong. And today he's still a very humble person and helped me be very focused on going forward and being confident again.
So probably 3 levels, and I'll start with what was at the time really important, but in the big picture sense is probably the least important. Having external mentors and advisors were critical during a really tough time from a legal liability point of view, and also just from a strategic point of view, because I knew that I could put my absolute focus into trying to find the solution, but I had some really good people around that I could turn to and say, let me know if you think I need to step back for a sec and re-look at this. And the legal liability when you're burning cash really quickly goes through the roof day by day. So I just want to highlight that. That's a really, it's not so much a scary thing, because most entrepreneurial businesses run close to the wire on a regular basis. But when you know this, hey, no, this is a bit different from that. This actually needs a serious look. Having some external guidance can save your skin. For me, it made a huge difference. So that's one level. The next level was as part of just unpacking what I describe as the difference between coming through this with just a heap of baggage versus leaving the baggage behind but carrying the lessons forward. So having catch-ups with mentors was really valuable, because they could help me unpack that and just speak truthfully to me about yep, this is good, or this is do this a bit differently, and so on. And then Probably the most important bit was just that reminder of hey, this is, you still have value in either by the way they spent time, by the things they spoke, and knowing that they cared about me more than just the commercial outcome was just a great reminder that the best is always yet to come, and so that was tremendous.
I think the question was interesting because it used the word quality. Particularly when I was young, I started the practice straight out of uni, so I was 21. I had some really crap mentors, really crap. And I wouldn't be here today unless I'd absolutely ignored everything they'd said. So I thank them, I really do. But be really careful with your mentors. Be really careful about being able to question them and say, are you sure?
Startup founders, for the most part, think they're pretty good, right? They wouldn't be starting the business that they're passionate about unless they thought they had the ability to do it. And then you can often take a big whack and hit the ground pretty hard. So on that basis, yeah, it's very, very critical to have expert advisors and mentors around you, subject matter experts, if you like. But for me, probably the most impactful mentors and advisors were still those people that I was happy to be really emotional around and knew that they would pick me up again and get me back to that place. And if you have done things before that people commended, don't be afraid to go back to those people. They might not be your official advisor or mentor on paper, but if they know that you've done a superb job at something before, it's great to call those guys up because they'll remind you of that. You don't have to remind them of that, they'll remind you of that. And I think that they were they still are, my best advisors and mentors, the people who I've been working with in the past, or friends and family who can encourage me to get back to my best. So do that.
I think Assyl had
Something that happened that was really interesting is a couple of the mentors that I particularly looked at as real heroes from a business point of view. Very, very successful business people, some significant exits, one it would have been in the hundreds of millions, but still down to earth, lovely people. What was interesting is after this episode happened with the business, they started to share stories of stuff that had totally bombed out for them. And that was a real revelation for me because as far as I was concerned, I just assumed that everything they did turned to gold and it was an absolute trajectory of, north all the way, and it was just smooth sailing, hard work but smooth sailing. These guys were just, unbelievable. So actually hearing that from them was just a great reality check that even for the people you just assume are just invincible, often there's a lot of lesson and a lot of ups and downs, which is the context of our discussion tonight. So it was actually really just quite a revelation to hear that from them.
Wonderful. I'll throw it out for one last question, but there's been some incredibly interesting stuff, and I'm trying to consolidate my notes here. A few different things about stepping away and separation of identity, time, and making sure that you take time for yourself and spread out so you're not over committed because it's easy to do that. The sharing of vulnerabilities, allowing yourself with the team around you, but also making sure there's a support network that'll follow up on that, and finding good mentorship. I think a lot of these is something that us as a group we can do, and ironically the separation thing, we're all here in our spare time after hours coming along, something that we all love to be part of, but it's something that maybe next time we should all have this down at the pub or something like that. But one last question before we wrap things up. If nothing else, how can people get help if they need it?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd add is try and stay positive, right? This is quite a down conversation in many ways, so try and pick yourself up as many times as you can. Where can you get help? There's the obvious places if you're feeling depressed or incredibly down, Beyond Blue, etc., those types of places, so I won't speak to that. For me, again, probably the biggest revelation was me walking home one night, came home very late, and my wife just said, can we get Blake back anytime soon? So I'd been working on the business for 3.5 years. And that actually made me happy, which is really odd because I could have taken it the other way. And I decided at that point that I'd impacted her enough that it was time to still continue what I was doing, because I loved trying, and I still love trying, but leaning on her, finding out that she wanted me to be back to who I was, which she called Positive Blakey. So Positive Blakey had to come out some way, shape or form. And again, for me, it's community. So just find those people around you who are going to give you the most love, the most support, the best chance of having a laugh and a smile, and you'll get up and you'll nail absolutely whatever it is that you're about to nail the next day.
Just admitting that it's gotten too much or it's getting too much. I think within yourself is also a good place to start. Go, oh, this is getting a lot. Don't wait till it's too much and you're lying on the floor crying. That's not a good place to be. So admitting within yourself, and that's probably the very, very first place to start, then being able to reach out. But just that self-knowledge, that self-acknowledgement of, hang on a minute, I need to take a breath.
My approach, because I didn't really know much in terms of the detail or the signs to look for it when it came to mental illness or depression, I kind of just set the barrier low and went, okay, well, I know it makes sense to not be isolated, so that was a good thing. I encourage that. And the other thing was, I actually just was open enough with people who I knew were qualified and kind of said, look, here's how I'm seeing things at the moment. Is there anything, and I sort of just trusted them to sort of, to give me a truthful view on, hey, do you need to, am I in trouble? Do I need to get help? Yes, no. In my case, the answer was, look, you're stressed, you're not depressed, but I think that what was important wasn't the answer, it was, I guess, being willing to get external accountability rather than just try and figure it out and go, it's all good, because, well, maybe it is, maybe it's not. Better to know for sure.
So where do you get help? So for anyone here that feels like they're, got a problem, I think first thing is talk to your friends and tell them that you're not well. If that doesn't help, when you break your arm, where do you go? Where do you go? Doctor? Right. So mental illness is no different to breaking an arm or cutting a finger. You go to a doctor and they'll diagnose what the problem is, and it'll either be stress or anxiety or mild depression or PTSD or whatever it is, and they'll help you get better. And if that doesn't work, they'll send you to a psychologist, or you can go online to a whole range of different things. But, if you've got some chemical imbalance in your head, which is what mental illness is, you shouldn't treat it any differently to breaking your arm or breaking your leg, and you should tell people and you need to go and get help. And the reason so many people kill themselves is they don't go and get help, and they don't tell people that they're not well. And that's about it.
Excellent. Oh, thank you all very much for your time. It's been a pleasure to MC this. I hope the audience has enjoyed this as much as I have. Please join me in thanking them for their time. Thanks. Yep. On a much cheerier note, we're going to, I think, leave you all from here. So beer and pizza, you have absolute free reign over what's left, so that's always a positive note to leave it on. And then, of course, there are the feedback alley. Please do go through and give them your feedback. Thank you all very much. Have a good night.